The Duke ordered his wife's refuge sealed, while 12 desperate women were still inside. When Eleanor begged him to delay until their testimonies reached the Queen, he burned the petition before her and chose the royal appointment offered in exchange for her silence. "They are runaway wives," the Duke of Ashbourne declared before the magistrates. "My Duchess has mistaken disobedience for suffering." The paper curled in the fireplace between them. 12 signatures disappeared beneath orange flame. Eleanor did not look at the ashes. She looked at her husband. Nathaniel stood beside the long table in Nightingale House, one gloved hand resting upon the closure order. The gold insignia of a lord of the royal household already waited in a velvet case near his elbow, though his appointment would not become official until the Refuge surrendered its residence. "You have never spoken to these women," Eleanor said. "I have spoken to their husbands." A magistrate shifted uncomfortably, but Sir Alistair Vane, the royal minister who had offered Nathaniel the appointment, remained perfectly still. Eleanor placed a second bundle of statements on the table. Lady Margaret's husband fractured her wrist. Lady Cecily was locked in a bedchamber for 11 days. Lady Anne was threatened with confinement in a private asylum. "Read their testimonies before you send them back." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. He had once helped Eleanor's mother repair the roof of this house after a winter storm. He had once said that no woman should need permission to escape a locked room. But ambition had found the hollow place inside him, the fear that the Ashbourne name was losing influence, and Sir Alistair had filled it with promises. "The law recognizes their husband's authority," Nathaniel replied. "It does not recognize your private tribunal. This is not a tribunal, it is a refuge. It is closed." He signed the order. The scratch of his pen seemed louder than the fire. Eleanor watched him lift the brass key from the table and give it to Sir Alistair. Nathaniel could still have paused. He could have read one testimony, questioned one bruise, or waited until the Queen received Eleanor's petition. Instead, he chose the gold insignia. Sir Alistair slipped the key into his coat. "The constables will enter at dawn," he said. "Any woman who resists will be restrained. Anyone who assists an escape will be arrested." His eyes rested upon Eleanor. Nathaniel said nothing. That silence wounded more deeply than the threat. After the men departed, Eleanor locked the interior doors and gathered the 12 women in the Refuge's small dining room. Some were noblewomen by birth. Others had acquired titles through marriage. Here, without jewels or servants, they looked simply like exhausted women listening for footsteps outside. Lady Cecily held her injured hand against her chest. "Will your husband truly surrender us?" "He already has," Eleanor answered. Fear moved through the room. Eleanor wanted to promise that she could protect them, but empty reassurance was another form of betrayal. Nightingale House had lost its legal patronage. Its gates were watched. 3 constables stood across the road, and Sir Alistair's carriage remained at the nearby inn. Still, Eleanor had been helping her mother operate the Refuge since she was 16. She knew every servant who could be trusted, every hidden cupboard, and every route used to deliver food without exposing the residents. "We have until dawn," she said. "No one leaves alone. No one opens a door unless I give the word." Lady Margaret approached her with a white ribbon wound around her fingers. "This was beneath my supper plate." Eleanor examined it. The ribbon was narrow, expensive, and tied in a peculiar knot. 2 loops crossed beneath a short tail. Her mother had taught her that knot years earlier, after returning from service in the Queen's household. Palace servants used it discreetly to identify attendants assigned to Her Majesty's private apartments. "Did anyone enter the dining room?" Eleanor asked. "No one, except us." Eleanor untied the ribbon. There was no message inside. But when she checked the remaining rooms, she found an identical ribbon beneath every woman's pillow. 12 ribbons. 12 palace knots. Someone had entered the Refuge before Nathaniel sealed it. Shortly after midnight, the kitchen bell rang once. Eleanor descended with a candle and found the rear passage empty. The door remained bolted from within. Nothing appeared disturbed, except the flour scattered near the pantry. Across it ran the narrow tracks of a serving cart. The tracks began at the wall. They did not lead to the door. Eleanor pressed her palm against the wooden paneling and felt a faint current of cold air. Her mother had never mentioned another passage, yet someone clearly knew more about Nightingale House than its owner did. A crash sounded above her. Eleanor ran upstairs. A sweet, unnatural odor filled the corridor. One by one, the women were collapsing. Eleanor reached Lady Cecily, but her own knees weakened before she could lift her. The candle slipped from her fingers. Darkness swallowed the house. Before dawn, constables broke through the front entrance. They found Eleanor alone on the dining room floor. The 12 noblewomen had vanished without their coats, money, or shoes. Every gate remained watched, and no carriage had been heard leaving the property. On each abandoned bed rested a white ribbon tied in the same palace knot. Sir Alistair held one up before the magistrate. "Proof of an arranged escape," he said. Nathaniel stared at his wife as 2 constables pulled her upright. "Where did you send them, Eleanor?" "I did not send them anywhere." Sir Alistair searched her pocket and removed a 13th ribbon. Unlike the others, it had been folded around a message. Eleanor recognized the words, but not the blood in which they had been written. "Before the procession turns." Her breath stopped. The Queen's carriage would pass Nightingale House in less than 2 hours. Outside, beyond the line of constables, 12 veiled women were already taking their places along the royal route. Eleanor stared through the open doorway at the distant figures gathering along the royal road. 12 women in dark cloaks stood at measured intervals beside the iron railings. Their faces were hidden beneath veils. From a distance, they resembled the missing residents of Nightingale House. But Lady Cecily could barely walk without assistance. Lady Margaret was taller than the veiled woman nearest the gate, and Lady Anne had arrived at the Refuge with her left arm bound across her ribs. The woman standing in her place moved both arms freely. "Those are not the women from the house," Eleanor said. Sir Alistair folded the blood-stained ribbon and placed it in his pocket. "How convenient." Nathaniel stepped between Eleanor and the doorway. "You were found alone in a locked house. 12 women are missing, and 12 figures are now positioned along the Queen's route. If you know what is happening, speak plainly." "Give me the ribbon." "You have seen it. The knot matters." For an instant, Nathaniel hesitated. Then Sir Alistair touched his sleeve. "Her Grace is delaying us. The procession must be stopped." "No," Eleanor said. "That may be precisely what they want." Sir Alistair turned toward her with carefully measured disbelief. "You expect us to allow Her Majesty to approach 12 possible assassins? I expect you to ask why they have made themselves so visible." The first bell of St. Matthew's Church rang across the fields. 90 minutes remained before the Queen's carriage reached the turning. Eleanor looked at Nathaniel. "Let me examine the bedrooms." "You are under arrest." "Then send a constable with me. But if you remove me now, you may lose the only chance of finding those women alive." Nathaniel's expression hardened at the challenge, yet behind his anger she saw uncertainty. He knew she did not make reckless claims. For 6 years, she had managed disputes among tenants, negotiated with physicians, and protected families whose names he had never bothered to learn. At last, he nodded to the magistrate. 10 minutes. Sir Alistair objected. "Your Grace." 10 minutes, Nathaniel repeated. It was not trust. It was merely the smallest concession fear could purchase. Eleanor climbed the stairs with a constable behind her. She entered Lady Margaret's room first and opened the shutters. The gardens below were bordered by wet earth. No footprints crossed them. She examined the washstand, the cold fireplace, and the narrow bed. The white ribbon remained on the pillow where the searchers had found it. Its knot looked correct, but when Eleanor touched it, the end pulled loose. Her mother's palace knot had been designed to remain secure when caught on a sleeve. This imitation had been tied by someone who understood its appearance, but not its purpose. Eleanor moved to the next room. That ribbon failed in the same way. "Someone copied the knot," she said. The constable frowned. "Why?" "To make us look toward the palace." She searched beneath the bed and found a smear of fine black dust beside one leg. The same dust marked the hem of the sheet. Coal would have been common in winter, but Nightingale House burned seasoned oak. Eleanor rubbed the powder between her fingers. It was mixed with something pale and grainy. Plaster. She remembered the tracks across the pantry floor and the cold air behind the wall. "Fetch the Duke." The constable did not move. "Now," Eleanor ordered. "Unless you would like to explain to the Queen why you guarded the doors while 12 women were carried beneath your feet." Nathaniel arrived with the magistrate. Sir Alistair followed without being summoned. Eleanor led them to the pantry and pressed along the wooden panels until she found a small iron catch hidden behind a shelf. The wall shifted inward. A narrow passage descended into darkness. Nathaniel took the lantern from the constable. You knew this was here? No, this was your mother's house. And she concealed women whose husbands employed investigators. Perhaps there were things she believed safer not to tell even me. The words struck Eleanor as she spoke them. Her mother had trusted her with the names of allies, the refuge accounts, and the location of its emergency funds. Why conceal an escape passage? Unless it had not been built for escape. They descended single file. The air grew colder. Fresh wheel marks cut through the dust, and fragments of white plaster lay on the stone floor. 30 feet beneath the house, the passage divided. The left branch led toward the road. The right sloped beneath the neighboring estate, land recently purchased by a company whose owners had never been publicly named. Eleanor crouched at the junction. A silver button lay in the wheel rut. It bore the crest of Lady Cecily's family. She came this way, Nathaniel said. She was brought this way. Sir Alistair lifted the lantern toward the left passage. The road is there. They escaped, willingly. Eleanor examined the wheel marks. The grooves on the left were shallow. Those on the right were pressed deeply into the damp earth. An empty cart went toward the road, she said. The loaded cart travelled east. Sir Alistair's eyes narrowed. It was the first unguarded reaction she had seen from him. Nathaniel noticed it too, but before he could speak, a dull pounding echoed through the right-hand tunnel. 3 blows. A pause. Then 2 more. Eleanor knew the pattern. Her mother had taught every resident to use it if she was ever confined where shouting might bring danger. 3 knocks, then 2. A woman was alive beyond the wall. Eleanor moved toward the sound, but Sir Alistair seized her arm. The Queen's procession is approaching. We have no time to chase echoes. 10. She pulled free. The women are down there. The Queen is in danger. Perhaps, but not from them. Sir Alistair stepped close enough that only Eleanor and Nathaniel could hear him. If you obstruct the Crown's officers again, Your Grace, the charge will no longer be concealment. It will be treason. Nathaniel looked from the tunnel to the minister who had promised him power. The church bell rang a second time. Then a new sound rolled through the passage, the heavy grinding of stone. The right-hand tunnel was being sealed from the other side. Eleanor grabbed the lantern. If we leave now, they will bury 12 women alive. Nathaniel caught her wrist. For one terrible moment, she believed he would stop her again. Instead, he turned to the magistrate. Delay the procession. Sir Alistair's face became still. The magistrate hurried away, but before he reached the stairs, a gunshot cracked through the tunnel. The lantern shattered beside Eleanor, plunging them into darkness. A woman screamed behind the closing wall. Then Sir Alistair's voice whispered near Nathaniel's shoulder. You have just destroyed your appointment for a wife who has already betrayed you. Nathaniel shoved Eleanor behind him as a second shot struck the stone wall. Down, they dropped to the floor. In the darkness, boots scraped against the passage, followed by the fading rattle of a cart beyond the narrowing opening. Nathaniel drew the pistol beneath his coat and fired toward the sound. The grinding stopped. A thin shaft of light remained beneath the stone barrier. Eleanor crawled toward it. Lady Cecily, she called. 3 knocks answered from the other side. Then 2. At least one of the missing women was still conscious. Nathaniel found the fallen lantern, but its glass had shattered and the oil had spilled. The constable struck a match. Its weak flame revealed a rusted iron mechanism set into the tunnel wall. Eleanor studied the chains and counterweight. Her mother had taught her to operate the refuge's lifting doors during emergency drills. This mechanism was older, but it obeyed the same principle. The stone was not being pushed into place. It was descending under its own weight. Hold the chain, she ordered. Nathaniel seized it with both hands. The constable joined him as Eleanor reached between the iron teeth and removed a small locking pin. The chain jerked. The stone barrier rose several inches. A man fired from the other side. The ball tore through Nathaniel's coat and grazed his upper arm, but he did not release the chain. Pull them through, he shouted. Eleanor pressed herself to the ground and reached beneath the stone. Her fingers found a woman's wrist. Lady Cecily cried out as Eleanor dragged her through the narrow space. Cecily's injured hand was bound against her chest, and a cloth had been tied across her mouth. Another woman lay behind her. Nathaniel's boots slipped in the mud. The chain is moving. Eleanor caught Lady Margaret by the shoulders and pulled. The stone struck the floor a moment after the woman's skirts cleared it. Silence returned. Only 2 of the missing 12 had been recovered. Lady Margaret coughed and opened her eyes. A bitter medicinal odour clung to her breath. "Where are the others?" Eleanor asked. Margaret tried to speak, but her tongue moved sluggishly. Eleanor loosened the woman's collar and found a dark stain near the neckline. The same sweet scent that had filled the refuge corridor rose from the fabric. "They were drugged," she said. "Someone carried them out on the cart. Sir Alistair emerged from the darkness behind them, or they drank willingly before staging this performance." Lady Cecily flinched at his voice. It was slight, but Eleanor saw it. "Do you know him?" she asked. Cecily stared at the ground. Sir Alistair stepped forward. "Her Grace is frightened and confused. You answered for her. I am trying to prevent more wasted time." Nathaniel held his wounded arm. Blood darkened his sleeve, yet his gaze remained fixed upon Cecily. "Look at the minister," he ordered. Cecily raised her head. Sir Alistair smiled at her with polished kindness. Her entire body began to tremble. Eleanor moved between them. "You will not question her. She is a witness in a matter concerning the Queen. She is injured, drugged, and terrified, and you are accused of abducting her." Eleanor turned to the constable. "You saw me pull her from beneath that wall. Record it." The man glanced at Sir Alistair, then at Nathaniel. Nathaniel's hesitation lasted only a second. "Record everything," he said. The constable removed a notebook. Sir Alistair's smile disappeared. They carried the women upstairs and placed them in the infirmary. Eleanor washed the drug from their skin, while Nathaniel's physician dressed his wound. Lady Margaret remained unconscious. Cecily woke briefly but refused to speak while any man stood in the room. Eleanor dismissed everyone except Ruth Bell, the Refuge's elderly housekeeper. Ruth had worked beside Eleanor's mother for nearly 20 years. She had no title, but every frightened woman who crossed Nightingale House's threshold trusted her quiet hands. When the door closed, Cecily gripped Eleanor's sleeve. "They wore palace uniforms," she whispered, "but the buttons were wrong." "How?" The crown faced downward. Eleanor remembered the silver button found in the tunnel. It had borne Cecily's family crest, not a royal emblem. Someone had scattered false evidence while overlooking the details on the uniforms. "Did you see where they took the others?" "No. I woke when the cart struck a wall. Margaret bit the driver, so they threw us out. I heard one man say they needed 10 women, not 12. Needed them for what?" Cecily's face drained of colour. "To surround the Queen's carriage." Eleanor leaned closer. Were the women meant to attack her? No. Cecily's voice broke. They were meant to die beside her. Before Eleanor could ask more, the front bell rang. Ruth looked through the infirmary window. The royal procession has stopped at the southern bridge. Relief lasted less than a heartbeat. 3 black carriages were entering the refuge grounds from the north. Armed men rode beside them, and the led carriage displayed the seal of the Lord Chancellor. Sir Alistair had moved quickly. Nathaniel met Eleanor at the foot of the stairs. His wounded arm rested in a sling. "The Crown has issued a warrant," he said. "Nightingale House is to be searched and placed under ministerial control." "Whose control?" Nathaniel did not answer. Sir Alistair entered behind the officers and removed the brass key Nathaniel had given him earlier. "Mine." He opened the records room and ordered his men to seize every testimony, letter, and register. Within minutes, boxes containing years of evidence were being loaded into his carriages. Eleanor stepped into their path. "Those documents identify women whose lives depend upon secrecy. They may also reveal which fugitives assisted a plot against the Queen. You arranged this warrant before the women disappeared." Sir Alistair's gaze sharpened. Nathaniel looked at him. "Is that true?" "Of course not. The seal is dry," Eleanor said. "But the ribbon around the warrant carries dust from the northern road. Your messenger could not have reached London, obtained the Chancellor's authority, and returned before dawn." For the first time, Nathaniel examined the document rather than the man presenting it. Sir Alistair gave an impatient laugh. "Your wife is distracting you with ribbons and dust while 10 potential assassins remain free." Nathaniel looked toward the gold insignia, still resting in its velvet case. Then he looked at Eleanor, standing before the refuge he had already surrendered. His shame surfaced, but ambition did not release him. "Allow the search," he said quietly. "If the warrant is false, we will challenge it afterward, after he learns the names of every woman who trusted us. I am trying to protect the Queen. No, you are still trying to believe the man who rewarded you for silencing me." Nathaniel recoiled, but he did not withdraw his order. Eleanor stepped aside only after Ruth whispered that Cecily and Margaret had been moved to a concealed linen room. Sir Alistair's men emptied the archives. As the final box passed, Eleanor noticed a plain wooden button caught beneath its lid. It was dark, scratched, and marked with a crescent-shaped cut. She had seen identical buttons on the coats worn by the men who delivered coal to the neighbouring estate. Eleanor quietly closed her fingers around it. Across the room, Sir Alistair watched the movement. Their eyes met. He now understood that she had found a link between the underground cart and the property east of Nightingale House. He leaned toward one of his officers and spoke too softly for Nathaniel to hear. But Eleanor read the command in the officer's glance toward the infirmary stairs. They were no longer searching for documents. They were searching for the two women Eleanor had rescued. Eleanor slipped the wooden button into her sleeve and moved toward the infirmary stairs before Sir Alistair's officer could block them. No one enters the women's rooms without Ruth or me. The officer placed one hand on his sword. This property is under Crown authority. Then show me an order authorizing you to search patients who require medical care. Sir Alistair approached, with the false warrant still in his hand. You are in no position to dictate terms. Eleanor deliberately raised her voice so the magistrate, constables, and servants could hear. Lady Cecily and Lady Margaret were recovered alive beneath this house. Both can identify the men who abducted them. If either woman is harmed while in your custody, every person in this hall will remember who demanded access. The officer's hand fell from his sword. Sir Alistair could intimidate individuals. He could not erase an entire room of witnesses without attracting the scrutiny he claimed to serve. Nathaniel stepped beside Eleanor. The women remain under my protection. She turned upon him. You closed the Refuge. I am still the Duke of Ashbourne, and that title did not protect them before dawn. A flush rose above his collar. Nevertheless, he ordered 2 constables, not Sir Alistair's men, to guard the staircase. It was a small victory, and Eleanor accepted it without gratitude. Sir Alistair smiled, as though conceding nothing. Very well, we shall begin with the servants. His officers separated the household staff and questioned them one at a time. Eleanor was confined to the morning room with Nathaniel and the magistrate. Through the windows, she watched the Refuge records being loaded into black carriages. Years of testimony were leaving her protection. Letters describing broken bones, stolen dowries, imprisoned daughters, and threats of private confinement now belonged to a man who served the husbands named within them. Eleanor turned to the magistrate. At least seal the boxes until the warrant is authenticated. Sir Alistair answered from the doorway. The documents must be examined immediately. Then examine them here. They concern national security. They concern women whose names can be used against them. Nathaniel rubbed his wounded arm. If the Queen was truly targeted, Alistair may need those records. Eleanor faced him. You continue to speak as if he discovered the danger. I did, and I delayed the procession. After I identified the false women and found the tunnel, the magistrate cleared his throat. The royal carriage was stopped before reaching the southern bridge. Whatever else has occurred, that action may have prevented an attack. Sir Alistair stepped into the room. I have already sent a report informing the palace that His Grace recognized the danger and ordered the delay. Nathaniel looked surprised. Eleanor did not. Her work had been taken from her before, quietly, politely, and always in the name of protecting the Ashbourne reputation. Estate reforms became Nathaniel's reforms. Her negotiations became his diplomacy. Now her warning would secure the very appointment purchased through her humiliation. You reported that Nathaniel recognized the danger? She asked. It is customary to communicate through the head of the family, and equally customary to omit the woman whose reasoning saved the Queen. Sir Alistair smiled. The Crown requires facts, not wounded vanity. Nathaniel's silence answered more clearly than words. Eleanor had spent years believing that if she served faithfully enough, truth would eventually speak for itself. Watching the black carriages depart, she finally understood that truth required a keeper, and she could no longer entrust it to her husband. A maid entered, carrying a tray. Before setting it down, the girl stumbled. One porcelain cup shattered against the floor. Sir Alistair swore and ordered her out. Eleanor recognized the maid as Lucy Harrow, 17 years old, recently employed after escaping an uncle who had tried to sell her into service abroad. Lucy never stumbled. As she bent to collect the broken pieces, Eleanor saw 3 letters scratched into the tray's underside. A. Che. East Coal Room. Eleanor knelt to help her. Did Ruth send you? Lucy's lips barely moved. They found the linen room. Eleanor's hand froze above a shard of porcelain. How long? Minutes. Sir Alistair stepped closer. What are you whispering about? The girl cut her hand, Eleanor replied. She wrapped Lucy's fingers in her own handkerchief and rose. I will take her to the kitchen. You will remain here. Nathaniel looked between them. Why? Because your wife is a suspect, and yet she has just prevented an attack upon the Queen. Sir Alistair's expression hardened, or redirected our attention from the true one. Eleanor met Nathaniel's eyes. If you mean to claim authority over this house, use it now. His pride responded where his conscience had repeatedly failed. My wife may tend an injured servant, he said. Eleanor led Lucy into the passage and waited until the morning room door closed behind them. They did not go to the kitchen. They ran. The East Coal Room was a narrow chamber beyond the laundry. Ruth waited inside beside Cecily and Margaret, who had regained consciousness, but could barely stand. They searched the linen press, Ruth said. We have, perhaps, 5 minutes. Eleanor opened the disused coal hatch. It led to a covered yard behind the kitchens, but Sir Alistair's men were already stationed outside. The wooden button pressed against her wrist. Coal deliveries. She looked at the black dust clinging to the hatch and remembered the pale plaster mixed with the powder upstairs. The carts in the tunnel had come from the neighbouring estate, but they had passed themselves off as coal wagons. When was the last delivery? She asked. Yesterday afternoon, Ruth replied. 2 carts, more than we ordered. The extra cart had not brought fuel. It had carried men into the house before Nathaniel sealed the gates. Eleanor crossed to the coal bins and pushed aside the upper layer. Beneath it lay several folded palace uniforms, bottles containing the sweet-smelling drug, and 10 lengths of white ribbon. Sir Alistair's men had concealed their equipment where a later search could discover it. Once found, it would prove that Eleanor had prepared the false uniforms and drugged the women herself. Lucy stared at the evidence. They mean to hang you. Footsteps approached. Eleanor could not remove everything. If she tried, they would catch her carrying it. Instead, she took 1 drug bottle, wrapped it in an apron, and gave it to Lucy. Go through the serving hatch. Find Dr. Henshaw at the village surgery. Put this into his hands and make him write down the hour he receives it. What about you? I will ensure they do not follow. Eleanor closed the girl inside the narrow hatch, just as the coal room door burst open. Sir Alistair entered with 2 officers and Nathaniel behind him. The minister looked past Eleanor at the uniforms, bottles, and ribbons. His expression became one of perfectly performed shock. Your Grace, he said to Nathaniel, I believe we have found your wife's preparations. Eleanor said nothing. While the officers gathered the planted evidence, she watched the open doorway. Lucy was escaping with the 1 bottle Sir Alistair could not replace or alter. Nathaniel lifted a palace coat from the coal. The crown on its buttons faced downward, exactly as Cecily had described. He looked at Eleanor with horror. Tell me you did not put these here. I did not. Sir Alistair held out the search warrant. These rooms were under her authority. So were the coal accounts, Eleanor replied. Read yesterday's delivery entry. Compare the quantity ordered with the quantity received. Then ask who purchased the neighbouring estate and where the tunnel ends. Nathaniel's gaze shifted toward the household ledger lying on a nearby shelf. For once, the truth was within reach of his own hand. All he had to do was open it. Sir Alistair quietly drew a folded paper from his coat. Before you believe her, Ashbourne, perhaps you should read the letter we found among the missing women's belongings. He gave it to Nathaniel. Eleanor recognized her own handwriting before her husband broke the seal, but she had never written the words inside. Nathaniel unfolded the letter beside the open coal bins. His face changed as he read. The anger Eleanor had expected did not appear first. Hurt did deep, immediate, and almost boyish. Then pride closed over it. What does it say? She asked. He handed the page to the magistrate instead of answering her. Sir Alistair supplied the accusation. It instructs the women to wear palace uniforms, approach the royal carriage, and create sufficient panic to halt the procession. Eleanor took 1 step forward. Let me see it. Nathaniel blocked her path. You deny writing it? I cannot deny words you refuse to show me. The magistrate finished reading, and passed the page across. The handwriting resembled Eleanor's closely enough to deceive anyone who had seen only her formal correspondence. Yet, the downward strokes were too heavy, and the ink had spread around several letters. She read the final lines. "When the Queen is removed from the carriage, our friends will complete what we began. Burn this after reading." Beneath them stood her signature. Eleanor held the sheet near the coal room lamp. This was written on cheap rag paper. Sir Alistair gave a dismissive shrug. "Criminal instructions are rarely sent upon engraved stationery. My mother taught me never to use porous paper for confidential names. Every letter from Nightingale House is written on linen stock with a Nightingale watermark. A cautious traitor might deliberately use something else." Eleanor turned the page. "Then your cautious traitor made a careless mistake. The ink contains iron sediment. My writing ink is made with oak galls and no iron filings because they damage archival paper." Nathaniel's eyes moved toward the household ledger on the shelf. The order for Eleanor's ink would be recorded there, beside the unexplained coal delivery. 2 answers waited within a few feet of him. Sir Alistair saw the direction of his gaze. "You know her hand better than anyone, Ashbourne. Is the letter hers?" Nathaniel stared at the signature. Eleanor understood the cruelty of the question. Sir Alistair was not asking for expertise. He was forcing Nathaniel to choose publicly between the wife he had already humiliated and the appointment upon which he had staked his honor. "Look at the ledger," she said. "You need not trust me. Verify it yourself." Nathaniel reached for the book. A bell rang outside. Then another answered from the southern road. Sir Alistair moved to the window. "The Queen's procession has turned back toward London. The palace will demand an arrest before noon." He faced Nathaniel. "If your wife remains free, every political enemy you possess will say you protected her. Your appointment will be withdrawn. Your family may be investigated with her." Eleanor watched her husband's hand stop inches from the ledger. There it was, the moment when he could still choose truth over fear. "Open the book," she said quietly. Nathaniel withdrew his hand. "Eleanor Ashbourne, you will remain confined to Nightingale House, pending a royal inquiry." The room became utterly still. The magistrate frowned. "A private confinement may not satisfy the Crown. I will sign an affidavit accepting responsibility for her custody." Eleanor looked at the man she had married. "You are not protecting me. I am preventing Sir Alistair from taking you to Newgate. No, you are preventing me from speaking to anyone who might prove that he forged this evidence." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "You were found in a house from which 12 women disappeared. Your handwriting appears on instructions concerning the Queen. Palace uniforms and drugs were discovered under your authority. And every piece of evidence was found by his men." Sir Alistair stepped between them. "Enough. The Duke is offering you a mercy few accused traitors receive." Eleanor's voice remained steady. "A prison chosen by my husband is still a prison." Nathaniel flinched, but he signed the affidavit. With that signature, he placed Nightingale House, its remaining servants, its records, and Eleanor herself under an inquiry supervised by Sir Alistair Vane. The minister's satisfaction lasted only an instant, yet she saw it. Nathaniel had not merely confined his wife. He had given the architect of the conspiracy authority over every witness and every piece of evidence. The officers escorted Cecily and Margaret from the coal room. Eleanor stepped in front of them. "Where are you taking these women?" "To separate locations for questioning," Sir Alistair replied. "They cannot be questioned without medical supervision. They were found beside materials used in a plot against the Crown. They were abducted. According to you." Lady Cecily clutched Eleanor's arm. "Please do not let them return me to my husband." Sir Alistair looked at Nathaniel. "The law recognizes Lord Merrow's right to retrieve his wife." Eleanor felt Cecily begin to shake. "Nathaniel, you heard what she said in the tunnel." "I heard only that she was frightened." "You saw her reaction to Alistair." "That is not evidence." "No, but it was reason to investigate something you have now refused twice." Nathaniel could not meet her eyes. Eleanor removed the silver chain from her neck. A small key hung from it, the last key her mother had given her. She pressed it into Ruth's palm. "Open the blue cabinet in my room. Give Lady Cecily the money inside." Sir Alistair seized Ruth's wrist. "No property leaves this house." Eleanor struck his hand away. Every officer in the room reached for a weapon. She did not retreat. "That money is my pin money. secured under my marriage settlement. It does not belong to the Duke, the Refuge, or the Crown." Nathaniel looked startled. "What are you doing?" "What you chose not to do, giving her a chance to survive." Sir Alistair ordered his officers to search the cabinet. Eleanor had expected it. She also knew the blue cabinet contained only a small portion of the fund. Her mother had hidden the remainder elsewhere, in a place known to Ruth alone. The argument gave Cecily time to whisper into the magistrate's ear. The magistrate's expression altered. "What did she tell you?" Sir Alistair demanded. Cecily closed her mouth. The magistrate stepped away from the officers. "This woman claims the abductors repeatedly mentioned Blackthorn Lodge." Nathaniel turned toward Sir Alistair. "That is the neighbouring estate." "A common name," the minister replied. "Who owns it?" "I have no idea." Eleanor took the wooden button from her sleeve. "The men who delivered the extra coal wore these. The same crescent cut appears on the delivery mark in our accounts. Open the ledger and compare them." Sir Alistair snatched the button from her hand. "Another object conveniently produced by your wife." He tossed it into the fire. Eleanor lunged forward, but an officer caught her. The button blackened among the ashes. Nathaniel stared at it burning, finally recognizing that an innocent minister would have preserved potential evidence. Yet before he could speak, hoofbeats thundered into the courtyard. A royal messenger entered, carrying a sealed order. Sir Alistair broke it, read quickly, and handed it to the magistrate. 10 missing noblewomen had been discovered inside abandoned carriages near the Queen's route. Each wore a false palace uniform. Each had a loaded pistol sewn into her cloak. All 10 remained unconscious. One had died during transport. A second message was attached. The weapons bore the Duke of Ashbourne's crest. Nathaniel turned pale. Because he had signed the confinement affidavit, Sir Alistair now controlled the Refuge inquiry. Because he had surrendered its armoury during the closure, the minister also controlled every weapon registered to the estate. Eleanor saw the truth strike her husband, at last. His decision had not saved his title. It had placed the rope around both their necks. Nathaniel read the royal message twice. "The Ashbourne pistols have been locked in the estate armoury since Michaelmas." Sir Alistair removed the gold insignia from its velvet case and closed the lid. "The armoury was surrendered to Crown officers when you authorised the closure of Nightingale House. I surrendered it to your officers. You signed the inventory." Nathaniel's face hardened. "You assured me the weapons would be secured, and they were, until your wife's accomplices apparently obtained them." Eleanor almost pitied him. Sir Alistair was using Nathaniel's own signatures as links in a chain. The closure order had granted access to the Refuge. The armoury inventory had transferred the weapons, and the confinement affidavit had placed every witness beneath the minister's authority. But pity could not erase choice. Nathaniel had been warned each time. A second royal messenger entered before he could respond. This man wore the insignia of the King's Guard and carried no courtesy in his expression. "By order of the Privy Council, the Duke and Duchess of Ashbourne are forbidden to leave this property. All estate accounts are frozen until the Crown determines whether Ashbourne funds supported an attempt upon Her Majesty." Nathaniel stared at him. "My tenants require wages tomorrow. The order permits no payments. The harvest crews will walk away. That is not the Council's concern. It would become their concern when hundreds of families went hungry," Eleanor thought. Yet hunger always reached cottages, long before it reached council chambers. The messenger continued. "His Grace's appointment is suspended. His seat at tomorrow's Royal Council has been revoked. Car." Sir Alistair lowered his eyes with admirable solemnity. Nathaniel looked toward the closed velvet case. The office, for which he had sacrificed the Refuge, had lasted less than a morning. By noon, soldiers surrounded Nightingale House. The dead woman was identified as Lady Beatrice Halewood, 26 years old, mother of 2 young sons. Her husband had petitioned the Crown to have her declared mentally unstable after she attempted to leave him. Eleanor had promised her protection. Now, Beatrice's body lay under guard in an abandoned carriage, dressed as an assassin. Eleanor stood alone in the infirmary and pressed both hands against the washstand until the shaking passed. She had been taught to remain composed because frightened women borrowed courage from the person helping them. But there was no one here to see her composure now. "I should have found the tunnel earlier," she whispered. Ruth entered quietly. "You did not build it. You did not drug them. You did not place that pistol upon her. I promised she would be safe." You gave her a door when every other door had been locked against her. The men who dragged her back into danger carry the blame. Eleanor closed her eyes. Her grief wanted a target, and she would not permit it to turn inward until it made her useless. Where is Lucy? She reached Dr. Henshaw. Relief loosened Eleanor's breath. The bottle? He sealed it in a medicine chest and wrote the time of delivery across the wax. Lucy watched him do it. They now possessed one piece of evidence outside Sir Alistair's control, with a witness and documented custody. But it would not save the remaining women quickly enough. A guard appeared at the infirmary door. Her Grace is required downstairs. The morning room had been transformed into an inquiry chamber. Sir Alistair sat behind Eleanor's desk. Nathaniel stood near the fireplace, no longer beside the man he had trusted, but not yet openly against him. A map of the Queen's route lay across the table. Red marks showed where the 10 women had been discovered. Each abandoned carriage had been positioned near a bridge, narrow lane, or crowded turning. Sir Alistair pointed to the pattern. Had the procession continued, armed women wearing palace uniforms would have surrounded the Queen at 3 confined locations. They were unconscious, Eleanor said. They might have awakened. With pistols sewn into their clothes, they could not even reach the weapons. They were intended to be discovered after the attack, Nathaniel said suddenly. Sir Alistair looked at him. Nathaniel moved one red marker closer to another. The women were placed where witnesses would see them. If someone else fired upon the Queen, these 10 would be blamed. Eleanor studied the map. For the first time, her husband had followed the evidence without waiting for her to lead him. Not merely blamed, she said. Killed. Nathaniel's expression changed. The Queen's guards would shoot armed figures approaching the carriage. None would survive to explain that they had been drugged. Lady Beatrice had died too early. Her death was a mistake, not the intended outcome. Eleanor examined the marked positions. The false women seen outside Nightingale House had drawn attention toward the southern road. The real women had been transported east through the tunnel, then divided among 3 carriages. But the assassination could not occur at all 3 locations. Only one was the true danger. The white ribbons, she said. Sir Alistair leaned back. You have already entertained us with your theory about knots. The imitation knots were tied incorrectly because their purpose was not to identify palace attendants. They marked locations. She rearranged the ribbons collected from the beds according to the lengths of their short tails. 4 were long, 4 medium, and 4 short. 3 groups, 3 carriage sites. Nathaniel bent over the map. Which group marks the actual attack? Eleanor remembered the 13th ribbon discovered in her pocket. Its tail had been cut at an angle, and the message warned, before the procession turns. The northern turning, she said, where the old toll house narrows the road. Sir Alistair stood. That location was searched. By whose men? Silence answered her. Eleanor traced the road beyond the toll house. On one side stood a row of warehouses. On the other, a church tower under repair. The Queen's open carriage would slow beneath wooden scaffolding. The attack will come from above, she said. The women below are meant to draw the guards' fire. Nathaniel reached for his coat. Sir Alistair's officers blocked the door. You are both forbidden to leave, the minister said. If my wife is correct, the Queen remains in danger. The procession has returned to London. The royal messenger shook his head. Not yet. Her Majesty refused to abandon the hospital visit. The route was changed. She will approach London from the north. Amga, directly through the old toll house. How long? Eleanor asked. The messenger checked his watch. Less than 40 minutes. Nathaniel addressed the guards. Stand aside. Sir Alistair produced the confinement affidavit. By your own signature, Ashbourne, I control movement from this house during the inquiry. Nathaniel's hand closed around the paper. He could not command the soldiers without openly defying the Crown authority he had granted Sir Alistair. An easy order would no longer repair what his ambition had enabled. Eleanor turned to the royal messenger. Send your fastest rider. Tell the Queen's Guard to search the church tower, not the women. Sir Alistair interrupted. No message leaves without my approval. The messenger hesitated between ministerial rank and immediate danger. Eleanor stepped toward the map. Lady Beatrice died because we were too late once. If you delay again, you will place the Queen beneath an assassin. The man made his choice. He ran for the courtyard. Sir Alistair signalled to an officer. Stop him. Nathaniel moved first. striking the officer with his uninjured arm. The two men crashed against the desk. In the confusion, Eleanor heard the outer gates opening and a horse galloping away. The warning had escaped. But Sir Alistair did not look defeated. He looked amused. "You believe the attack is at the church tower," he said. Eleanor's stomach tightened. Sir Alistair had allowed them to study the map, rearrange the ribbons, and send the warning. He had wanted the Queen's Guard diverted upward. The tower was another decoy. Eleanor looked again at the 3 carriage sites and suddenly understood what the ribbons actually measured. Not distance, time. Long, medium, short the duration, each carriage would delay the Queen's escort. The true target was not waiting along the road. The delays were designed to make the Queen reach one exact place at one exact moment. A cannon sounded in the distance. Nathaniel released the officer and turned toward the window. Beyond the trees, smoke rose from Blackthorn Lodge, the estate at the end of the underground tunnel. Eleanor saw the trap clearly. The missing women, the false assassination, and the altered route had all been used to separate the Queen from her full escort. And Blackthorn Lodge stood beside the only bridge she could now use to return to London. "We sent the guards in the wrong direction," Eleanor whispered. A second cannon fired. This one came from the bridge. The second cannon blast shook dust from the ceiling. Eleanor ran to the window. Black smoke climbed above the eastern trees, but the sound had come from lower ground, where the river curved beneath Blackthorn Bridge. Sir Alistair's amusement vanished. That was the first thing Eleanor noticed. If the cannon had fired according to his plan, he would not have looked surprised. Someone else had advanced the timetable. "Your accomplices have begun without you," she said. Sir Alistair recovered quickly. "You are becoming hysterical." "No. You expected the Queen to be delayed longer." Nathaniel looked at the minister. "Is that why you allowed the messenger to leave?" Sir Alistair ordered the soldiers to arrest them both. Nathaniel seized the false warrant from the table and held its seal over the fire. "The wax is still soft beneath the surface," he said. "My wife told you this document could not have travelled from London. You ignored her." I represent the Crown. You represent yourself." Nathaniel snapped the seal in half. The soldiers hesitated. Their authority rested upon the order now broken in the Duke's hand, but the royal restrictions remained. Eleanor did not wait for them to resolve the distinction. She crossed to the servants' passage, pulled Ruth inside, and locked the door behind them. "The old laundry stair," Eleanor said. "Does it reach the stable yard?" "It did, before your husband rebuilt the west wing. Then we shall discover whether his builders were thorough." The stair ended behind a plastered wall. Eleanor struck it with an iron poker until a crack opened. Ruth joined her, and together they tore away enough plaster to crawl into an abandoned tack room. Lucy was waiting there with Dr. Henshaw. The physician held a sealed medicine chest against his coat. "I examined the drug," he said. "It contains laudanum, valerian, and powdered foxglove." "Enough to kill?" "In the wrong proportion. Lady Beatrice may have received too much." "Can you identify who prepared it?" "Not from the ingredients alone." Lucy produced a folded delivery note. "I took this from the surgery door. Someone pushed it underneath while the doctor was working." The note ordered Dr. Henshaw to surrender the bottle to Sir Alistair's officers. It bore a government stamp and a signature from the minister's secretary. The order proved Sir Alistair knew about the bottle, but he could claim an officer had informed him. Eleanor examined the paper. A faint lavender line marked one edge. Nightingale House used the same coloured line in its coded admission forms. Her mother had devised the system so a servant sorting documents could identify danger without reading private names. Lavender meant the writer acted under threat. "Who delivered this?" Eleanor asked. "A boy from Blackthorn Lodge," Lucy replied. "He said a gentleman made him wait while the note was written." "Did he see the gentleman?" "He saw only a hand beneath the door." Eleanor looked at the wooden button's crescent-shaped cut in her memory. Sir Alistair had burned the original, but another might exist on the coat of the man who employed the lodge servants. "We need the delivery records," she said, "not the Refuge copies. The coal merchant will retain his own." Dr. Henshaw pointed toward the growing smoke. "The merchant's yard stands beyond Blackthorn Bridge. Then we go around, by the mill road." Ruth caught Eleanor's arm. "Soldiers guard every main gate. The Refuge taught women how to leave houses watched by their husbands." Eleanor opened the loose floorboard beneath the tack cabinet. Her mother's emergency fund lay inside. Coins, unsigned bank drafts, and a plain iron key. Nathaniel had never known it existed because Eleanor had never needed to use it. Until now, they left through a drainage culvert beneath the stable yard. Eleanor purchased a farmer's cart and sent Ruth with Cecily, Margaret, and Lucy to the old dower cottage at Refuge, property secured to Eleanor through her marriage settlement. Sir Alistair could control Nightingale House, but he had no authority there without another warrant. "You must come with us," Ruth insisted. "Not yet." Eleanor gave her the remaining money and the blue cabinet key. "If I do not reach Renford by nightfall, send copies of Cecily's statement to 3 newspapers and 1 to the Queen's private secretary. You have no statement. Write it now. Have Cecily sign before Dr. Henshaw and Lucy." For the first time, the women's testimony would exist beyond Nathaniel's house, Sir Alistair's inquiry, and Eleanor's personal custody. It would belong to several keepers. Dr. Henshaw remained with Eleanor, carrying the sealed drug sample. They had nearly reached the mill road when hoofbeats approached. Nathaniel emerged between the trees on a grey horse. Eleanor stepped into the road. "You cannot return me to Nightingale House. I did not come to return you." "Then why are you here?" "To help." The word sounded too easy. She looked at the torn sleeve over his wounded arm and the mud covering his boots. He had escaped his own soldiers, but one act of defiance did not erase years of accepting her labour while withholding his trust. "If you ride with me, you obey my conditions," she said. Nathaniel dismounted. "Name them." "You do not speak for me. You do not conceal evidence to protect the Ashbourne name. You do not bargain with Sir Alistair for your appointment. If I tell you to carry a message rather than confront a man, you carry it." His pride resisted. She watched it happen. Then he bowed his head. "Agreed. And whether we save the Queen or expose this conspiracy, Nightingale House will never again belong to you." Pain crossed his face. "Agreed." They continued toward the coal merchant's yard, on foot. Along the way, Dr. Henshaw told Nathaniel how Eleanor had identified the drug, protected its custody, and established 3 witnesses. Nathaniel listened in silence. At the edge of the wood, he stopped. "How many times have you done this?" "Done what?" "Created records no powerful man could quietly destroy. Since the first husband claimed his wife had injured herself. And I thought you merely offered them rooms." Eleanor did not answer. He had lived beside her work without seeing its discipline, danger, or value. Regret had finally opened his eyes, but recognition arrived too late to be a gift. The coal yard appeared deserted. Its office door stood open. Inside, ledgers had been pulled from the shelves and thrown into a burning stove. Eleanor seized the iron poker and dragged out the uppermost book. Flames had consumed its spine, but several inner pages remained intact. Nathaniel smothered them beneath his coat. The surviving entry showed 2 coal carts delivered to Nightingale House the previous afternoon. The purchaser's name had been blotted out, but the payment column contained an unusual notation: 12 crowns received in new coin. Dr. Henshaw frowned. "A crown is worth 5 shillings. Why record the number of coins rather than the sum?" "Because the coins can be traced," Eleanor said. New silver crowns, issued for the Royal Jubilee, had been distributed only through selected government offices. Sir Alistair's department was one of them. A floorboard creaked overhead. Nathaniel drew his pistol. A young clerk descended from the loft with both hands raised. Half his coat buttons were missing. The one remaining button bore a crescent-shaped cut. "I made the deliveries," he said, "but I did not know there were men beneath the coal." "Who paid you?" Eleanor asked. The clerk looked toward the window. "I will tell the Queen's Court. Not here." Nathaniel removed a handkerchief and wrapped the surviving ledger pages. "You will have protection." The clerk laughed bitterly. "Like the women at the Refuge?" Nathaniel had no answer. Eleanor placed the witness between herself and the door. "We are taking you to Renford Cottage. Your statement will be copied before we move again." A pistol clicked behind them. Sir Alistair stood in the office doorway with 4 armed men. He had followed Nathaniel, just as Eleanor feared he would. "Give me the ledger," he said. Nathaniel raised his weapon, but another officer pressed a pistol against Dr. Henshaw's medicine chest. One shot would destroy the sealed bottle and kill the physician holding it. Sir Alistair looked at Eleanor. "You may keep the witness or the evidence, Your Grace. You cannot keep both." Before she could decide, the young clerk tore the ledger from Nathaniel's hand and ran toward the rear door. A gun fired. The clerk fell. The burning pages scattered across the floor, and Sir Alistair's men stamped them into the mud. The minister seized the sealed medicine chest from Dr. Henshaw. Then he looked down at the wounded clerk. "Now," he said softly, "she has neither." Eleanor dropped beside the clerk. The bullet had entered beneath his shoulder. Blood spread across his shirt, but he was still breathing. "Press here," Dr. Henshaw instructed. Eleanor folded her handkerchief against the wound, while the physician attempted to reach his medical bag. One of Sir Alistair's officers kicked it away. "He will bleed to death," Eleanor said. Sir Alistair examined the sealed medicine chest. Then perhaps he should have remained loyal to his employer. Nathaniel raised his pistol. "Let the physician treat him, and permit you to leave with a living witness. If he dies, every man here becomes responsible." Sir Alistair smiled. "According to whose account? The Duchess accused of treason, the husband who helped her escape royal custody, or the physician found carrying a stolen poison?" End quote. Aninus. He had already arranged the story. The burned ledger would become an attempt to destroy incriminating accounts. The drug sample would be called stolen evidence. The wounded clerk would be blamed upon Nathaniel, whose pistol had been fired inside the tunnel and could not easily be distinguished by any frightened witness. Sir Alistair's men had not merely followed them. They had waited for enough actions to transform resistance into apparent guilt. A bell rang outside. 2 official carriages entered the yard, accompanied by soldiers wearing the king's colours. Behind them came 3 newspaper correspondents. Sir Alistair had brought an audience. He stepped into the yard and raised the sealed chest. The Duke and Duchess of Ashbourne were discovered destroying evidence connected to the attempted assassination of Her Majesty. Their accomplice resisted arrest and was wounded. Eleanor heard pens scratching across paper. Nathaniel looked at her. "If I surrender, can Henshaw treat the clerk?" Sir Alistair considered the bargain. "If you confess to removing your wife from lawful confinement." "That is not enough," Eleanor whispered. "He will still kill the witness later." Nathaniel lowered his voice. "Then make certain the witness's words survive now." He dropped his pistol and walked into the yard. "I removed my wife from Nightingale House," he announced. "I struck a Crown officer and broke the seal upon the search warrant." The correspondents moved closer. Sir Alistair's satisfaction returned. Nathaniel continued before he could interrupt. "I also signed the order that closed the Refuge. I transferred my estate weapons to Minister Vane's officers. I ignored my wife when she warned me that his warrant was false, his evidence planted, and his authority used to silence witnesses." The yard fell quiet. Sir Alistair's face hardened. Nathaniel turned toward the correspondents. "My ambition gave this man access to Nightingale House. My signatures enabled every act that followed. If the Crown wishes to charge someone for that disgrace, it may begin with me." The confession destroyed any hope of recovering his royal appointment. It exposed his negligence to Parliament, his tenants, and every family whose daughters Eleanor had protected. It could cost him his political influence and perhaps control of his private estate. Yet it did not prove Eleanor innocent. Sir Alistair recovered first. "A moving attempt to shield your wife." "I am not shielding her. I am naming what I did. You are a desperate husband, repeating the claims of an accused traitor." Nathaniel looked toward Eleanor, but did not ask for forgiveness. "That judgment belongs to her." Sir Alistair ordered both of them arrested. While soldiers closed around Nathaniel, Eleanor leaned over the wounded clerk. "Tell me who paid you." His lips moved. She lowered her ear to his mouth. "Not Vane," he breathed. Eleanor's hand tightened over the wound. "Who?" "The woman with black gloves." Before he could say more, his eyes closed. Dr. Henshaw pushed past the officer and examined him. "He is alive, but barely. I must remove the ball, immediately." The king's soldiers allowed him to work now that dozens of witnesses were watching. Sir Alistair could no longer permit the clerk to die openly. Eleanor looked at the minister's bare hands. In the tunnel, she had assumed he commanded every detail, but he had been surprised when the cannon fired early, and the clerk claimed someone else had purchased the coal. Sir Alistair was not the architect. He was an ambitious accomplice who believed he controlled the scheme. The true conspirator was a woman with access to government money, knowledge of palace customs, and a reason to target the Queen and the residents of Nightingale House. A woman powerful enough to use Sir Alistair and contemptuous enough to act before he was ready. The soldiers searched Eleanor before placing her in a carriage. They took her emergency money, her mother's iron key, and the 13th ribbon. Sir Alistair carried the medicine chest himself. Every apparent piece of evidence was once again under his control. As the carriage departed, crowds gathered along the road. News of the alleged conspiracy had spread. Some shouted that Eleanor should hang. Others demanded the names of the missing women. At the entrance to Renford village, Eleanor saw smoke rising beyond the trees. Renford Cottage was burning. Ruth, Lucy, Cecily, and Margaret had been sent there. Eleanor lunged toward the carriage door, but the soldier opposite restrained her. Sir Alistair rode beside the window. A tragic consequence of hiding fugitives in an unguarded house. If they die, they will become 4 more victims of your conspiracy. Nathaniel's carriage followed behind hers. Through the small rear window, Eleanor saw him fighting his guards. Sir Alistair ordered the procession onward. They were taken not to London, but to Blackthorn Lodge. The neighbouring estate's gates closed behind them. Eleanor and Nathaniel were separated and locked in adjoining rooms, while the newspapers announced that the Duke and Duchess of Ashbourne had been captured destroying evidence. By evening, the surviving noblewomen had been transferred into government custody. By nightfall, Sir Alistair informed Eleanor that the Queen had survived an explosion at Blackthorn Bridge, but that 3 guards had been killed. At dawn, Eleanor would face a special inquiry inside the lodge. Sir Alistair intended to present the planted uniforms, forged letter, Ashbourne pistols, and drug sample. With her own records seized and her witnesses scattered, she appeared to have nothing left. Then, a servant entered carrying Eleanor's supper. The woman wore black gloves. She placed the tray upon the table, and Eleanor recognized the gold bracelet at her wrist. A serpent curled around a tiny crown. Lady Margaret had described that bracelet in her sealed testimony. It belonged to the woman who had recruited abusive husbands into a private political society. The servant noticed Eleanor staring and quickly covered it with her sleeve. At once, Eleanor understood why the white ribbons had been tied incorrectly. The true conspirator had never served inside the palace. She had learned the knot by watching Eleanor's mother, and only one woman had spent years beside her mother at Nightingale House before being dismissed for selling residents' names. "Mrs. Vale," Eleanor said. The woman stopped at the door. Mrs. Vale had changed her hair, posture, and name, but not the small burn scar beneath her left ear. "You should have died with your mother," she replied. Eleanor now knew who had designed the conspiracy, but a recognition made in a locked room would convince no court. She needed Mrs. Vale to reveal knowledge only the architect could possess. Eleanor looked at the untouched supper, then at the black gloves. "You made one mistake," she said. Mrs. Vale smiled. "Which one?" "You left Lady Beatrice alive long enough to tell me where the real ledger is hidden." The smile vanished. There was no other ledger, but Mrs. Vale did not know that. And by dawn, Eleanor intended to make her search for it in front of the entire inquiry. Mrs. Vale's hand remained on the door latch. Lady Beatrice was unconscious when she left Nightingale House. She woke inside the carriage. "You could not have spoken to her." Eleanor kept her expression still. "I did not say she spoke to me." The mistake landed. Mrs. Vale had just revealed that she knew Beatrice's condition during transport knowledge, never included in the public reports. Eleanor needed someone else to hear it. Beyond the door, a guard shifted his weight. Mrs. Vale glanced toward him, then closed the door rather than continue the conversation. Eleanor heard the key turn. She examined the supper tray. A bowl of broth, bread, a spoon, and a folded linen napkin lay upon it. Mrs. Vale had brought the meal herself because she wanted to see whether Eleanor possessed evidence. That fear could be used again. Eleanor tore a narrow strip from the napkin and tied it around the spoon using her mother's true palace knot. Then she pushed the handle beneath the wall, separating her room from Nathaniel's. She tapped 3 times, paused, then tapped twice. Nathaniel answered. Eleanor scratched words into the soft pewter with a hairpin. Vale, false ledger. Make her search. Trust, Ruth. She slid the spoon through the gap. Minutes passed. Then it returned with a message scratched beneath hers. Public inquiry. Palace secretary coming. I will follow your lead. Not direct the inquiry. Not rescue her. Follow. For once, Nathaniel understood the position he had earned. At dawn, the great hall of Blackthorn Lodge, filled with magistrates, crown officers, newspaper correspondents, and representatives of the families whose wives had disappeared. Sir Alistair had chosen the lodge because he controlled its entrances and had already placed the evidence there. But Nathaniel's public confession at the coal yard had forced the Privy Council to send Lady Augusta Fenwick, the Queen's private secretary, to observe the proceedings. Eleanor was brought in under guard. Nathaniel stood on the opposite side of the hall, without his ducal sash or ceremonial sword. His public privileges had been suspended. He looked exhausted, but when Eleanor entered, he merely inclined his head. Sir Alistair began with the forged letter. He described Eleanor as a resentful wife who had manipulated vulnerable women into participating in an attack upon the Queen. The palace uniforms were displayed beside the Ashbourne pistols. The drug bottle sat within Dr. Henshaw's medicine chest, its seal apparently unbroken. "We will show," Sir Alistair declared, "that Duchess Eleanor drugged the women when several attempted to withdraw from her conspiracy." Lady Augusta looked toward Eleanor. "You will have an opportunity to answer. I ask only that every object remain where all witnesses can see it." Sir Alistair smiled. Unlike Nightingale House, this inquiry conceals nothing. The great doors opened. Mrs. Vale entered, wearing a plain grey dress and no gloves. A lace collar concealed the burn scar beneath her ear. Sir Alistair introduced her as Mrs. Marian Ward, the former housekeeper who had discovered Eleanor's alleged plans. Eleanor allowed the false name to stand. Mrs. Vale testified that she had served at Nightingale House for 6 months. She claimed Eleanor ordered unusual quantities of coal, purchased palace uniforms, and practiced the white ribbon signals with the residents. "Did the Duchess discuss a ledger?" Eleanor asked, when permitted to question her. Mrs. Vale's eyes sharpened. "No." "Did Lady Beatrice possess one?" "No." "Were you present when Lady Beatrice was placed in the carriage?" Sir Alistair rose. "The witness has already said she worked inside the Refuge." "That was not my question." Lady Augusta permitted it. Mrs. Vale folded her hands. "I saw Lady Beatrice carried from the house." "Was she conscious?" "No." "Did she awaken during transport?" "I could not know." Eleanor looked toward the guard who had stood outside her room. He avoided her eyes. He had heard Mrs. Vale's earlier contradiction, but fear alone would not make him speak. "Not yet." Sir Alistair presented the drug sample next. Dr. Henshaw was brought forward under guard. He examined the wax seal and frowned. "This is not the bottle I secured." Sir Alistair lifted the chest. "Your initials appear upon the wax." "My initials were copied. Can you prove it?" Dr. Henshaw could not. Eleanor asked to see the bottle. The drug inside was nearly colourless. The original mixture had contained powdered foxglove, which settled in a faint green layer when left undisturbed. Sir Alistair had replaced it, but the substitution also meant the original bottle still existed. He could not destroy it until he knew whether Dr. Henshaw had retained a sample or written its exact composition elsewhere. Eleanor turned to Mrs. Vale. "Lady Beatrice hid the coal merchant's true ledger before she died. It records the purchaser of the carts and the serial marks of the silver crowns used in payment." Murmurs spread through the hall. Mrs. Vale remained composed. Sir Alistair did not. "You claimed earlier that Beatrice told you where it was," he said. "No, I claimed she lived long enough to do so." A subtle difference, and one Sir Alistair had remembered from a private conversation he had not witnessed. Eleanor saw Lady Augusta notice. "The ledger is inside Nightingale House," Eleanor continued. "My mother constructed a hiding place no dismissed servant ever discovered." Mrs. Vale's calm expression cracked. "You are lying. Then you have nothing to fear." Sir Alistair called for the inquiry to continue, but Eleanor refused to name the location. "If I am returned to Nightingale House with Lady Augusta's officers, I will retrieve it." The minister objected immediately. Mrs. Vale remained silent. Eleanor expected them to search before anyone could reach the Refuge. The question was whether the public trap could survive beyond this room. The great doors opened again. Smoke-stained and limping, Ruth Bell entered beside Lucy, Lady Cecily, and Lady Margaret. The Renford fire had not killed them. Ruth had hidden everyone inside the stone dairy when she smelled lamp oil beneath the windows. Cecily carried 4 signed copies of her statement. Lucy held the physician's written record of the original bottle's custody, and Ruth carried Eleanor's mother's iron key. Sir Alistair stepped backward. Mrs. Vale stared at the key. That involuntary recognition was all Eleanor needed. "The hiding place is not at Nightingale House," Eleanor said. "It is here." Inside Blackthorn Lodge, the building once used as the refuge before my mother moved the women away from you. Mrs. Vale turned toward the western wall. Every eye followed hers. Eleanor pointed to a faded wooden panel behind Sir Alistair's chair. "If there is no ledger," she said, "why did your witness just show us where she believes it is?" Lady Augusta ordered the wall opened. Nathaniel took the iron key from Ruth, but did not approach the panel. He placed it in Eleanor's hand. The decision belonged to her. Eleanor unlocked the concealed compartment. Inside rested no ledger. There was only an old black glove, a bundle of letters tied with lavender thread, and a list containing the names of 12 noblewomen. At the bottom appeared a 13th name, Her Majesty the Queen. Mrs. Vale laughed. "A list proves nothing. Anyone could have placed it there." Eleanor lifted the oldest letter, but did not open it. The seal bore the crest of a man standing inside the hall, a man who had insisted he did not know who owned Blackthorn Lodge. Eleanor turned the seal towards Sir Alistair. "Then perhaps its author will explain why he sent Mrs. Vale the Queen's route 3 months before my husband closed the refuge." Lady Augusta broke the seal. She read the first line and looked directly at Sir Alistair. Lady Augusta read the letter in silence. Sir Alistair's seal remained unbroken in her hand, but his own words had already betrayed him. "Marian, the Queen, will travel without the King on the 17th. If Ashbourne closes the refuge as promised, you will have access to the women and the Eastern Passage." The date was 3 months earlier. Nathaniel had not yet received the offer of a royal appointment when Sir Alistair wrote it. His ambition had not created the conspiracy, but it had provided the conspirators with the final opening they needed. Lady Augusta raised her eyes. "Did you write this?" Sir Alistair glanced toward the doors. The King's soldiers blocked them. "It is a fabrication." Eleanor removed the remaining letters from the compartment. "Then we shall compare the paper, ink, seal, and handwriting with the forged letter attributed to me." Dr. Henshaw examined the sheets first. "This paper contains the same rough fibres as the false instructions supposedly written by the Duchess." The magistrate compared the handwriting. "The forged letter is written in a disguised hand, but several capital letters match Minister Vane's correspondence." Sir Alistair turned upon Mrs. Vale. "You assured me these had been destroyed." The words escaped before he could stop them. A shocked silence moved through the hall. Mrs. Vale's face became cold. "And you assured me Ashbourne would surrender his wife without creating a public scandal." Nathaniel closed his eyes. He had delivered exactly what they expected. Eleanor's silence, the refuge keys, the armory, and control over the witnesses. Lady Augusta ordered both conspirators restrained. Mrs. Vale snatched a pistol from the evidence table. She aimed it at Eleanor. Nathaniel moved forward, but Eleanor did not wait to be rescued. She seized the heavy closure register and struck Mrs. Vale's wrist. The pistol fired into the ceiling. Ruth pulled Lady Margaret aside while 2 soldiers forced Mrs. Vale to the floor. The register fell open near Eleanor's feet. Inside it were the admission dates of hundreds of women whose lives Nightingale House had changed. Sir Alistair had called them disobedient wives. Mrs. Vale had seen them as expendable bodies. Eleanor saw them as witnesses whose suffering, powerful men had expected the world to ignore. Under questioning, the complete scheme emerged. Years earlier, Marian Vale had worked beside Eleanor's mother. She secretly sold residents' names and locations to their husbands. When Eleanor's mother discovered the betrayal, she dismissed Marian and moved the refuge from Blackthorn Lodge to Nightingale House. Marian spent the following years building an alliance among influential husbands who feared that their wives' testimonies would expose cruelty, illegal confinement, stolen settlements, and political corruption. Sir Alistair joined them for power. The Queen had privately requested a report on protections for married women. If the 12 noblewomen testified, several members of Sir Alistair's faction would lose offices, fortunes, and influence. So the witnesses had to disappear. The conspirators intended to drug them, dress them as assassins, and place them around the Queen's route. Hidden marksmen would fire upon the royal carriage, after which the guards would kill the apparently armed women. The dead could be blamed for the attack. Nightingale House would be condemned as a nest of treason, and the Queen's proposed inquiry would die with its witnesses. Lady Beatrice had received too much foxglove when she resisted inside the cart. Her death was not part of the plan. but it revealed how little her life had ever mattered to them. The cannons at Blackthorn Bridge were fired early because Marian no longer trusted Sir Alistair to complete the attack. The explosion killed 3 royal guards, but Eleanor's warning caused the Queen's carriage to stop before reaching the damaged section. The true drug bottle was recovered from Sir Alistair's private cabinet. Lucy's record of the hour and Dr. Henshaw's wax mark established that it had been exchanged after entering his custody. The coal merchant's clerk survived his wound. Before 3 magistrates, he identified Marian as the woman who paid him with new Jubilee crowns issued through Sir Alistair's department. No confession alone decided the case. Every revelation was secured by an object, a witness, a contradiction, or a record that the conspirators could not erase. Sir Alistair was stripped of office and charged with conspiracy against the Crown, attempted regicide, evidence tampering, and responsibility for the deaths at Blackthorn Bridge. Marian Vale faced the same charges, together with kidnapping and Lady Beatrice's death. The husbands who funded their society were publicly named. Several lost court appointments, and proceedings began to restore money and property taken from their wives. Nathaniel's consequences were different. He had not planned the attack, but he had knowingly refused opportunities to investigate. He had publicly disgraced his wife, surrendered her refuge, empowered a corrupt minister, and confined Eleanor to preserve his ambition. Before the Royal Council, he named each failure without blaming Sir Alistair's manipulation. "My wife gave me the truth," he said, "and I chose the reward offered for ignoring it." He resigned his remaining political offices and accepted a formal suspension from court. Then he signed an irrevocable trust, transferring Nightingale House, its operating funds, and the unentailed land surrounding it to trustees chosen by Eleanor. He restored every private document seized from the Refuge and paid compensation to the residents from his personal fortune. Most importantly, he publicly withdrew his accusation and acknowledged that Eleanor, not he had identified, and prevented the attack upon the Queen. The Crown offered Eleanor a permanent role, advising the new commission on protections for married women. She accepted. 3 months later, Nathaniel came to Nightingale House without a carriage, servants, or ducal insignia. The repaired sign hung above the entrance. Beneath it stood a second name, the Beatrice Wing. Eleanor met him outside. He did not ask to enter. "I have taken a house in York," he said. "The separation settlement is complete. You will receive everything we agreed upon." She nodded. "I brought the final key." He placed the brass Refuge key, the one he had once taken from her, and given to Sir Alistair upon his open palm. "I do not expect forgiveness. That is the first fair thing you have expected of me." Pain crossed his face, but he accepted the truth. "If, in time, you permit me to write, I may read your letters. That is all I can promise. It is more than I deserve." Eleanor took the key. Nathaniel bowed and walked back toward the road alone. She watched until he passed beyond the gates. Then she returned to the entrance, where Ruth, Lucy, Lady Cecily, and Lady Margaret waited beside 4 newly arrived women. On the morning Nathaniel closed the Refuge, he had taken the key from Eleanor's hand and declared that 12 women would be returned to those who harmed them. Now, Eleanor unlocked the doors herself. No husband, minister, or duke stood beside her to grant permission. "Come inside," she said, and this time the doors closed, only to keep danger out.